This video took significantly longer to make than I expected because man is it annoying making sure I have every character's arts and skills in a workable place or otherwise have gameplay footage for them because man, there is a lot of party members in this game. Regardless, it is finally here, the Xenoblade X party member tier list. In this video, we'll be ranking every single party member in the game based on how strong they can be and what useful support options they may have. Reminder, if you enjoy guide content like this and want to support my channel, please do consider subscribing. A lot of my viewers are not subscribed, and I'm super close to that 100,000 milestone, so any support would be greatly appreciated. Let's go ahead and get started. So, as a quick explanation of criteria, the main factors for this tier list are just going to be how strong is the character when player controlled, so essentially how easily they can do a lot of damage and also stay alive, and how strong is the support that the character offers. Even if you aren't player controlling a character, can they still be useful to you, or even if you are, can they still be useful to the rest of the team? As we all know, Cross is the best character in the game, so we will be excluding him from the list, but this should be a pretty effective criteria for ranking the remaining characters. In the interest of not making the video take forever, since we do have a lot of characters to get through, I'll only be providing the Spark Notes explanations for most of these, but I can elaborate in the comments if you do have questions or just want to know a little bit more about one of the placements. Let's just go in order and start with Elma. I would say it is pretty fortunate that Elma is one of the first party members you get in the game because she's actually one of the best party members that you can possibly have and one of the best characters to player control early on in the game. She has access to a lot of fantastic traits, including Ghost Factory, meaning she can grant the decoy effect to every character in the entire party, including herself, of course, meaning she has access to that guaranteed evasion because it's basically Ghost Walker except in the Air of Effect format. Not only that, but being in the Full Metal Jaguar class, she actually has access to some really nice supporting arts from the dual swords, including Shadow Runner, which can boost her own potential, Blood Sacrifice, which is a great way of building TP, Side Slash, which is absolutely fantastic in Overdrive for TP, and also access to Stream Edge, and then on the dual guns, Executioner as a really, really strong potential-based damaging art. She also has access to Primer to boost her crit power, and all around can just do a lot of damage compared to most other characters in the entire game, while also making herself basically invincible thanks to Ghost Factory. She has great skills that make Overdrive even easier to use, and she has a class bonus that also grants even more additional potential, so her Executioner can hit even harder. She is absolutely one of the best characters in the entire game, and I think this makes her worthy of the very top of A tier. Next up, we have Lyn. She is the shield trooper you get access to pretty early on in the game, and she is very okay, definitely a solid B tier character. Her main contribution to the team is likely just going to be a really effective toppler thanks to Wild Down and the skill Long Topple that she has access to, meaning she can topple enemies very effectively. She also can very easily taunt enemies with Trash Talk, meaning it's going to be very, very easy for her to get aggro from enemies. And all around, she can function as a pretty effective tank in a party supporting role. Now, she only has 3 skill slots, and she's not going to have any damage boosts on these skill slots, so her Gatling gun is going to be a little bit wasted compared to what she probably could do otherwise, but if you want to try to have any kind of damage with her, you do have access to both Hellfire and Thermal Payload, meaning you can actually make a pretty strong potential-based build if you really, really want to. She also has an easy drive building overdrive count thanks to access to these Gatling gun arts, meaning she can hit max overdrive and kind of make her topples even more effective and very easy to apply just by doing that, since of course that'll reduce enemy resistance. She can also run a Reflect build with Super Shield if you want to do that as well, and overall she just kind of decently fulfills her role. I will say she is kind of outclassed by a lot of the other shields in the game just because they offer more as far as party support, but she's not bad for when you get her, and she does still have some decently positive traits going for her. Next up, we have Irina, who I will also be placing in B tier, but above Lyn this time around. So Irina is very useful as a supporting character since she has access to both Energy Source and Last Stand, making her the only supporting party member that has access to both of these. Energy Source, of course, raises your potential, and Last Stand grants TP to your entire party, which can be very, very beneficial as a supporting character just for having both that potential boost buff effect and being able to grant TP to people that want to be using those potential-based arts. I think that makes her very, very solid as a supporting character. She also has access to Assault Hammer, meaning she can actually topple lock somewhat consistently because of that, since it's a very fast topple art, but she does not have access to Long Topple, meaning you will have to use Assault Hammer pretty often to kind of keep that topple going. She also has access to some pretty useful auras and full specs, and she has Screamer as well, which can inflict sleep, so she has access to a lot of different supporting options available to her. Early on in the game, she can actually do a lot of damage with Quick Cannon as well, although I would say her damage definitely falls off near the end of the game. She is also the character who has access to Smooth Recovery, which is of course one of the best count builders in Overdrive, and just in general is really, really useful as an art just to kind of have as a green art effect. She may not be one of the stronger characters damage-wise later on in the game, but she does have a lot of useful support effects, and I think that can be very beneficial as a party member at the very least. Next up, we have Gwin, who I'm unfortunately going to be putting in C tier. Now, as an early game character, Gwyn isn't too terribly bad, but once you get Overdrive, he gets immediately outclassed and is pretty much just going to be left behind for most of the game after that. Now, Gwyn has access to offensive stance and some good, powerful melee arts, but outside of that, he doesn't really have too much going for him. His assault rifle arts aren't very useful for support, and he doesn't really have anything going for him in any of the assault rifle art slots outside of just Furious Blast to build overdrive count, and maybe Burst Grenade if you want to try to do some TP-based damage, but otherwise he just doesn't really have a lot compared to some of the other characters in the game, especially some of the other long swords, so that's going to make it hard to kind of rate him higher. You can use defensive stance to try to keep yourself alive with Gwyn, since that's his really only option to try to keep himself alive, and you can kind of alternate that with offensive stance to try to build in some stronger offensive arts in between there if you want to try to keep yourself alive just by alternating those arts, but you are going to need a lot of TP if you do plan on doing that. Regardless, Gwyn isn't necessarily terrible. You can probably make most characters in this game work, but I do think he is definitely really outclassed by the other longswords available in this game. After that, we have Doug. Doug is another character who I'm going to be placing in the C tier, because once again, he's just outclassed by the other Photon Sabers in this game, I would say. Doug has access to some pretty useful skills as far as Aura, Assault, and Supreme Sword to give him some pretty decent damage with melee arts, but outside of that, he doesn't actually have too much going for him. Compared to every other Photon Saber, he's the only one without a Reflection art, meaning he can't take advantage of Reflect-based strategies to stay alive, meaning he has a lot more trouble staying alive compared to other Photon Sabers, which can be more annoying. He does have access to Gravity Blast as a topple art, but this is going to be a little bit less reliable compared to just having that instant guaranteed Reflect. But not having access to Astro Librium is just going to place him behind the other Photon Sabers, in my opinion, just because he really lacks that way to really consistently keep himself alive, and a more consistent way of just kind of dealing damage by just keeping that aura up. And since it seems like we're just getting all of the rather underwhelming C-tier characters out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about Hope. So Hope is up next, and unfortunately she is probably considered widely the worst party member in the game. And this is mainly because she just doesn't do any type of damage at all compared to her contemporaries. She doesn't really have anything that can really allow her to do much damage at all. The best you've got is Black Butterfly and Stellar Ray, but even then she doesn't really have the tools that just kind of allow her to solo enemies compared to some of the other characters. Her only real way to keep herself alive is going to be Astral Protection or Starlight Kick, just kind of try to topple lock or just trying to keep yourself alive with attribute resistances, which aren't necessarily bad. And if you want to use her exclusively as a support character, you can use Black Butterfly for that purpose. And she does have Energy Source as well, which can boost the potential of a party member. But otherwise, she is definitely one of the weaker characters in this game, unfortunately. And you're probably going to get better party support from a different party member instead of just using Hope, sadly. At least she's cute and nice, and hopefully that person that was asking me for Hope thumbnails is happy now that I was able to actually talk about her in a video, right? Continuing on, we have HB. So HB is the definition of pretty much a supporting character that does not do any damage at all. I'm going to be placing him near the top of B tier, right under Irina, but this is not a character you use if you want to actually do damage. HB is pretty much party support to the very end with the arts and skills he has access to. First of all, he obviously has access to Wild Down as a topple art. He has Long Topple as well, meaning his topples can be extra effective. He has access to Last Stand, which is very, very good as a party supporting effect for just kind of boosting the TP of all of the members in your party so they can use their potential arts more and they can generate their own TP easier. He has access to Taunt Arts with Decoy Round, which is really, really useful as well, just to kind of make sure the aggro is on him since he does have some pretty decent defensive utility. He unfortunately does not have the Reflect Art compared to other shields, but he doesn't really need it when he has such effective topple locking and it's like pretty good survivability outside of that as well. He does get access to Gun Force if you do want to try to do some damage with your Assault Rifle. You do have access to Burst Grenade if you want to try. But overall, he's just going to be mainly a supporting character, and in that role, he does end up excelling. Last Stand is really good, Toppling is really good, and overall, he's pretty effective as a supporting character. Yelv is up next, and overall, he's just going to be mainly superior to Doug. Now, compared to Doug, his skills are a little bit worse. He only has 3 skill slots compared to 4 skill slots, but he does have access to Secondary Accelerator and Supreme Sword. Unfortunately, he does not get access to Aura Assault, which would have been really, really nice to have. If he got that, he'd probably be basically completely outclassing Doug in general. But he does have access to the Reflect Art Astro Librium. I mean, you can activate this, run a Reflection build, and basically take no damage from anything except for arts that pierce Reflection. He also has access to Essence Exchange, meaning he's actually going to be the Photon Saber user that has the easiest time generating TP and the easiest time keeping up Overdrive, which is very, very beneficial as well. All around, Yelv is still very, very solid. He can chain his Starfall Blade, Starfall Rondos very, very easily into each other, and Starfall Blossom if you want to run that as well. And all around, he is a pretty solid character because of that. He's definitely not going to be as strong as some of the other Photon Sabers, but he does have the easiest way of just kind of generating TP, easiest overdrive. And all around, he's a pretty decent character, especially because he is one of those party members that can run the Reflect build and basically keep himself alive no matter what, which is, of course, always going to be very nice. Next up, we have El, who is probably going to be the best shield user in the entire game. He is going to be a bit more defensive compared to HB. He does have access to Super Shield for the Reflection ability, so he can run a Reflection-based build as well if you want him to. But the main thing he has, well, he also has Wild Down and Long Topple as well, meaning he also gets the ability to just topple enemies for a very long time and kind of keep them topple-locked. But the main thing he has over Lyn and HB is just going to be Mind Storm. So Mind Storm is a very, very good art that grants potential up to your entire party, which means you can grant potential up to every character in your party using TP-based damaging arts, which is, of course, very, very useful, especially if you're running a setup that relies on potential-based damage. Once again, compared to other shields, he also has access to Trash Tart, which means he can easily gain aggro that way. He even has access to Astral Protection from his Cycle Launcher arts if you want to run that as well. And he even has access to Starlight Kick if you want to have 2 topple arts for whatever reason, if you don't have Overdrive or something. All around, El is a pretty good character, so I'll be placing him in A tier because I think he is just that good and worthy of being in the A tier. Next up, we have Frye. I'm going to be placing him near the bottom of B tier. So Frye has a pretty similar problem to Gwin in that he's just kind of an outclassed longsword by 2 of the other really strong options that you have access to. But he's still a longsword, so he can still be fairly strong. He does have access to Offensive Stance, one of the best independent multipliers. He just doesn't have too many strong melee arts to really take advantage of it. Now, you can set up a pretty decent potential build with him, especially if you want to try to use your ranged weapons, because he does have the Gatling Gun, which is also a really strong ranged weapon that you can use. You also have access to thermal resistance down on your longsword, so you can combo that kind of into your thermal payload, and like if you're using a thermal Gatling, just kind of Hellfire as well. So Frye does have access to those options at the very least, so he can do a decent amount of damage just kind of running that instead. And you can also run defensive stance without much drawback for some form of survivability as well if you plan on doing that, since of course you don't cut your ranged attack or your potential if you are using defensive stance like that. Outside of defensive stance, he does have trouble with survivability though, and he's just going to be outclassed damage-wise by other options that you have, and he offers basically no party support at all, so really not going to be the best character, unfortunately. He is okay, but definitely not going to be as strong as the other options that you have available to you. Next up, we have Phog. So Phog is actually going to go near the top of A tier, right behind Elma, because, well, he's basically just Elma light. Compared to Elma, he does not have access to Ghost Factor. He has Ghost Walker instead, which is a single target decoy buff, but it's still decoy and it's still really, really powerful. Ghost Walker, obviously one of the best arts in the entire game. Absolutely the best form of defensive utility. It means Phog can focus entirely on damage, just like Elma, basically. Compared to Elma, he has 1 less skill slot, but the skill that you could actually get in that slot doesn't really matter that much since you don't have access to all of the really strong skills that the game has to offer. He still has a very easy time keeping up Overdrive thanks to the skills that he can access. And compared to Elma, his base class does not have as much potential, so he doesn't get as much base potential compared to Elma, but he's still really, really strong, and he's not as strong as Elma, but he's basically the best discount Elma you can ask for. Compared to Elma, he does have access to combat limbo, though, which Elma does not have, so that is one unique aspect of Phog, and one thing he does have over her at the very least. Next up, we have Alexa, who is going to go in the bottom of B tier for me. So Alexa has a couple positive aspects going for her. She has access to Raijin, which means she has a Reflect art, meaning she can reflect attacks and have some decent form of survivability that way. Outside of that, she also has access to the TP art on Javelin Maximum Voltage, which means if she loses her skill in battle, she does get a lot of additional damage on this art, and it can combo pretty well with some of the other arts that you have as far as doing additional damage. And if you want to run another TP art, you have access to Burst Grenade on your Assault Rifle as well, which can be a decently powerful art if you're focusing on a more TP-focused or potential-focused build. As far as her Assault Rifle art, she also has access to Assault Hammer, meaning she does have that ability to topple the enemies as well, which I think makes her decently useful. She doesn't have access to Long Topple or anything, so she's not going to be as useful as toppling as the other Long Topplers that use Shield, but having that really fast art available to her is still really, really nice regardless. And like I said, she also has the ability to reflect with Raijin, so she has decent odds at surviving. Hair Trigger can combo decently well with Burst Grenade as well, just to get a lot of additional damage, especially if you can actually apply a decently powerful Blaze effect. And it works really well if you can actually topple the enemy with Assault Hammer beforehand also. So she has a couple decent options available to her to actually do a lot of damage, but she's still going to be using the mainly outclassed Javelin and Assault Rifle weapons as far as actual pure damage is concerned, so she's not going to be as useful as a lot of the other damaging options because of that, but she does have a couple decent options there at the very least. Next up, we have Murderess, who I will be placing at the bottom of A tier. Now, despite getting trolled and not having the dual guns, despite being in the Winged Viper and Full Metal Jaguar class line, Murderess actually has some really solid skills. She has Aura Assault, which is already really nice to have. She has Trigger Happy, which means she can reduce cooldowns when she triggers ranged combos, and she also has Hellhound, which can actually increase her overdrive duration as well, which is all really nice things to have when you are using the character. Now, unfortunately, since she does not have dual guns, she does not have access to Ghostwalker, but she does have a lot of really other positive aspects, like access to Gravity Lunge for a topple art, even though it's not the strongest topple art or the easiest to inflict topples, since it takes a little while. And it can combo very well with Jetstream, which inflicts stun, so you can actually kind of freeze that topple duration, which kind of helps out a lot when you don't have access to long topple. She also has access to 7th Edge, a really strong melee attack art, which combos very well with her Killing Machine buff, and she also has access to Astral Protection as a form of keeping herself alive. If you play or control her, she actually has some pretty decent damage, and she also has access to Side Slash, so she should have absolutely no trouble keeping TP and Overdrive or anything like that either, so she'll easily be able to spam Gravity Lunge to keep that topple applied. She only has access to one green art, which is just Lightning Cloak, so that can be a little bit of an issue, which you're actually trying to build overdrive count, but it's not really the biggest deal in the world. 7th Edge is still a really strong art, just kind of spam in general, so Murderess is not a bad character. Next up, we have Boze. He is also another Javelin, meaning he does have access to Raijin, which means he can run a Reflect build and just kind of not take any damage at all because of that. And he does have access to Eagle Eye, which is a sniper rifle support art, which can grant accuracy up to the entire party, or sorry, ranged attack up and accuracy up to the entire party, which is somewhat useful depending on the builds you are running, but I just don't put much stock in this personally myself, and I just don't think he's going to be really doing that much damage otherwise. Now, Sniper Rifle can do a lot of damage, but that usually relies on some of the new arts in this game, and Boze does not have access to any of those new arts, so I just don't really think he's going to be the most useful, and Javelin is just a very weak melee weapon, unfortunately, so compared to Alexa, he's just a little bit less useful overall. I'm going to be placing him at the very top of C tier here, but C tier nonetheless, because I just do not find him the most useful, and I also just don't like Boze, so you know what, replace him in C tier. He also doesn't get maximum voltage on his Javelin, so he has even less damage than Alexa there too. Next up, we have Nielnail. Now, Nielnail is a very interesting case. She has 4 skill slots with 4 of the best possible skills in the entire game. Aura Assault, Fast Forward, Supreme Sword, Inner Search. If she just had access to a 5th skill slot and Core Crusher, this could actually be a meta build for Cross, honestly, as far as actual skills are concerned. The problem comes when you actually examine her arts, they are extremely underwhelming compared to what she actually should have access to. She only has 3 damaging melee arts, so all the bonuses she gets to all of her melee attack and even the potential bonus are just kind of wasted. Backslash is not a very strong art at all. Electric Surge is not going to be the strongest art in the world either, depending on what you are doing. And your only TP art is going to be basically 100 shells, which is okay, but it's just not going to be the strongest in the world given the very low hit scaling on the art compared to basically every other TP art. This means in practice she ends up being less useful damage-wise than Murderess is overall, since they have the exact same combination of weapons, dual swords, and psycho launchers. And just overall, that just kind of makes her a bit underwhelming. Now, she does have access to a slightly better topple art and Starlight Kick compared to Murderess, and she also has access to Astral Protection as well as just an additional form of survivability if you want to run that aura instead. And she can use Shadowrunner as a way to boost her own potential to try to boost the damage of 100 shells further, but she doesn't have a way to boost her melee attack like Murderess does, so Electric Surge and Backslash are even less useful because of that also. So it seems like she really wants to run a potential-based build, but when she doesn't have access to Stream Edge and she only really has access to 100 shells, which is just one of the weaker TP potential-based arts in the entire game, it's really hard to actually get a lot of damage out of her, unfortunately. Her new arts, Heroic Tail and Conduction Rise, are also pretty highly specific depending on the situation, and you're not likely to use her over using Cross if you're ever going to be using these arts, so you don't really get a lot of benefit out of that either. And all around, despite seeming like she should be good on paper, she just ends up feeling a little bit outclassed compared to what she should be, so I think that's going to be worthy of the B tier, unfortunately. Next up, we have Liesel, the other new character. Now, at first glance, she uses a Javelin, so that's not very good, but on second glance, she uses the dual guns, which is great. That means she has access to Ghostwalker Executioner, which automatically puts her above most characters in the game just off that alone, and worthy of A tier. Now, she's not as good as Phog or Elma, since they have a much better melee weapon, melee supporting weapon to their dual guns, since the Javelin is not the greatest. The Javelin does have access to Hair Trigger, but of course that doesn't really help all that much since dual guns have a lot of multi-hit arts, so you don't get the biggest benefit out of it, unless you are running 0-0, which of course Liesel doesn't have access to because she's not the character that learns 0-0. Regardless, though, just having access to Ghostwalker, just having access to Executioner is great. Early Bird is not a bad aura to run either, so you have access to that as well. And you also have Combat Limbo if you want to use Effect Stasis. So there's a lot of really useful effects that you do have. And since you are running a Javelin, you can technically run a Reflect build as well, but I don't know why you would since you have access to Ghostwalker instead, which is just going to be better overall. Effect change can be somewhat useful as well if you really want to trigger any kind of combo at any time. If you really want to use some of your Javelin arts or just have 2 TP arts to use if you want to use like Trident Buster or something. But overall, Executioner is going to be your main source of damage. Ghostwalker, Early Bird, Executioner, all pretty solid abilities to have. Primer is also great as well. Just having dual guns automatically makes you at least an A tier in my opinion. What a great weapon. Next up, we have Nagi. So, Nagi is the only character with 5 skill slots outside of Cross on the Drifter class, of course. What a goat. Now, this doesn't mean that Nagi has so many useful skills that can really take the place of these 5 skill slots, but he does have 5 skill slots at the very least. He also has access to True Stream Edge and Blossom Dance, 2 of the best longsword arts out there, and he has access to Offensive Stance, and compared to Frye and Gwin, he can do a lot more damage. I would also say he can run a potential build a lot better, and he can take more advantage out of just alternating defensive stance and offensive stance, something that is only really good on these specific characters, of course, since other characters just have better form of survivability than ever having to use defensive stance. But regardless, you can kind of alternate, use your offensive stance, use your Blossom Dance, and then go back into defensive stance to kind of keep yourself alive even against really strong enemies, even without having super high resistances, since you're obviously going to want to try to get as much potential as possible. You also have access to Burning Slash and Incendiary Edge if you want to try to do even more thermal damage, since you can do a lot of damage with that TP art as well. You can probably combo it with Blossom Dance if you really want to get a lot of damage. And in a environment where you are basically fighting a static enemy that can't hit you back, Nagi has potential for some of the most damage in the entire game. So Nagi, definitely a very, very strong character, and because of that, I think he is definitely worthy of the A tier ranking here. Next up, we have Celica. Now, in the original game, Celica was definitely the best party member in the entire game, and it wasn't really a competition at all. In this game, she does have competition with one other character, I would say, but I would still probably give the edge to Celica overall myself. But it really just depends on how you value certain things. We'll talk about the other character a little bit later, but for now, Celica is definitely going to be going into the S tier. Celica is another one of the dual gun users. She is the 4th one and the final one that uses dual guns in the game, meaning she has access to Ghostwalker, automatically a very good sign. Has access to get Executioner, automatically a very good sign. She has access to 0-0, which is one of the best just general ranged attack arts as well. But the main kind of force that kind of separates her compared to her contemporaries that use the dual guns is her access to the knife weapon class. Because she has access to the knife, she has access to energy source, which means she can boost her own potential with a buff, and she has access to the full specs buff as well, which can also boost her potential even further, in addition to her ranged attack should she need that as well. She also has access to Black Butterfly, which can lower the ether resistance of enemies, meaning she can do a lot more damage by comboing this with Executioner should she be using ether-based weapons. She also has access to the Inner Search skill, meaning she gets more potential that way as well. And just overall, she ends up having some of the absolute highest DPS in the entire game because of that. She will get a lot of damage out of her Executioners and will be one of the easiest characters for just kind of soloing basically any kind of boss in the entire game with someone other than Cross. If Cross didn't exist, Celica would basically replace him on most setups if you were trying to be optimal. She is that good and definitely going to be one of the strongest damage characters in the entire game. Just in general, she has access to so many good options. She can even use a sleep build if you really want to use that as well. And then finally, before the spoiler section, we have Mia. So Mia is kind of the middle of the pack standard character in my opinion. I'll be placing her around the middle of B tier here. She has access to some pretty strong arts. Beam Bomber is one of the strongest ranged arts in the entire game, and she can definitely get a lot of benefit out of that with an aura active. She can do a lot of additional additive damage, and she also has some pretty good auras as well just for boosting her damage even further. Being a knife, she also has access to Black Butterfly, meaning she can do a lot of damage with ether-based attacks as well. And she has some pretty strong multi-hit purple arts, meaning she shouldn't have any trouble keeping up and maintaining overdrive thanks to just being able to generate a lot of TP with her build. Her only real form of survivability is just going to be using Gravity Blast to topple though, and that's going to be one of the main weaknesses of trying to use her, but if you can set her up right, she can do a lot of damage, and she can be pretty fun to use, and she does have pretty useful party support thanks to having access to Knife. Energy Source is great as a boost effect and a bonus effect just to kind of give to your allies or yourself if you want to boost your own potential, and Black Butterfly is always just going to be a pretty useful art also. Alright, here is your official spoiler warning before we talk about the last 2 characters really quickly. Obviously, the last 2 characters are going to be characters that many people consider spoilers, so before we get into them, here's your spoiler warning. Alright, let's talk about the first of these 2 spoiler characters, Gajarg. So Gajarg is probably the best Photon Saber for pure damage just in general. Gajarg has access to some really nice skills, Aura Assault, Supreme Sword, Fast Forward. These are all great skills if you want to get as much damage out of your melee arts as possible. Unlike Doug, he also has access to the reflection art that the Photon Saber has, meaning he actually has a good form of survivability just by using Astrolibrium. It'll also boost his own beam damage, so if you're using a beam-based setup, you will get a lot of additional damage just by having this aura active. He can also very, very easily spam Starfall Blossom into Starfall Rondo and Starfall Blade with just kind of using that general rotation very easily. The one negative he kind of has is he doesn't have access to Essence Exchange like Yelv, which can make it a little bit more difficult to kind of keep an Overdrive Gajar compared to some of the other characters that can use the Photon Saber. His other negative is a weird one. I don't know if it's because of a character model thing, but he can't equip certain armor, which means that there are certain armors that he does not get access to. Like, he can't equip an eye patch, so he cannot get an Appendage Crusher on that, which is a little bit annoying. But overall, he's still pretty strong character, definitely the best of the Photon Sabers as far as pure damage is concerned, I would say. And I think that does make him pretty valuable, especially because he has a pretty easy form of survivability with a Reflection build, and it doesn't really cut into his melee damage since it does not really competing with anything there. So overall, Gajarg's pretty useful. He does at least have access to the ray gun kind of arts that just give more TP and overdrive, so that's really nice. Niopic Screen, Subterfuge. You can get a lot of TP back with those arts at the very least. And then finally, our last spoiler character, the Great Owl Xenoblade, the strongest and coolest guy ever. As I kind of already alluded to before, he is going to be our second character in the S tier. Owl just has access to the best party support in the entire game with Howling Soul. Howling Soul is an absolutely ridiculous Omni buff that does not coincide or overwrite any other buff effect, and it boosts melee attack, ranged attack, and potentially a pretty ridiculous amount just by default, making Owl one of the strongest characters in the game just based on that alone. He also has access to Hercules Blow and offensive stance, meaning he can absolutely hit like a truck as well, compared to basically every other character in the entire game, outside of maybe a couple that can kind of keep up with him. But even still, Owl can hit extremely hard with this art. So if you want to do any kind of damage with Owl, he can go ham with Howling Soul and with his offensive stance and with Hercules Blow to do a lot of damage to enemies. Even outside of that, he also has a couple other additional party support capabilities thanks to Eagle Eye, just kind of boosting ranged attack of the entire party. And he also has access to Intercept. This is your only real form of survivability with the character. He doesn't have access to defensive stance like some other characters. So that means you are going to have to kind of be very careful if you are playing as Owl, if you want to kind of keep yourself alive against higher level enemies, if you're not planning to run resistances or anything like that. But if you have someone kind of supporting Owl, making sure the enemy is toppled or something like that, you should be fine. But otherwise, make sure you're mixing in Intercept between all of your other moves just to kind of keep the enemy stun locked as much as you can, so you are taking as little damage as possible. Some of the skills you have do alleviate this as well. You can kind of increase your survivability with some of those skills. And overall, Owl is just a really, really powerful character, one of the best party members in the game, just from all the abilities that he does have access to. Alright, that covers every single character. There's definitely no one I am overlooking, definitely no one else that matters here. So this is going to be our final tier list. As tier lists can sometimes be controversial things, feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments below or anything like that if you think I should change anything. I will admit this is definitely one of the harder tier lists to make, because there are a lot of minor things that you could definitely kind of consider are way more than other factors, and that could change some of the placements around. But regardless, I do think this kind of gives a good idea of general strength of a lot of the party members and kind of what you would want to be focusing on, or who we'd want to be focused on using throughout the game, or just kind of in the post-game in general if you want to use someone outside of Cross. So I think that is going to cover it for this video. I do hope you learned something from watching this video, and if you did, please do be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As I said, once again, getting very close to 100,000 subscribers. Would really love to hit that milestone. Every little bit helps, so any support is greatly appreciated. Make sure to share with your friends too. So with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and hopefully I will see you back here soon for a few future guides and future videos on the Xenoblade series.